Do you like living in Austin?
I do. It is really hot. It's really hot. So that has been a struggle.
Would you leave because of the heat?
When I moved here, I really didn't know anybody. And so I feel like it's taken me a long time to find groups and find my people and all of that. Whereas LA, I went to school there. I have friends that are family there. The weather is always perfect. So, my businesses are thriving here, which is a great thing. I would love to be in both.
We're in the middle of the country, so you can go wherever you need to go.
Yeah.
And then we actually take off during the summers.
As long as you leave in the summer.
It's not livable.
Even right now, I'm it is brutal to just walk outside and...
Everyone's making believe it's over, too.
Yeah.
Everyone's outside going oh, this is super nice. And it's not.
There was one
close.
midday or something.
We met on a super hot day. Do you remember when we properly met? It was when...
I was a million years... Also, my memory is so bad.
So we had a mutual friend that was off buying banjos, and he dropped us off at the beach in San Diego before a premiere of a gymnastics movie that I think you were in.
Ari's movie.
Yeah, you were in it, right?
Yeah, full out.
Yeah. Okay. And Deverett was the producer. That's where I met him too. And you and I were just on the beach waiting for him to come back. And I was just hi, I'm Aaron. I think we have an Instagram picture together.
Yeah, it was at Ari's house or something.
Outside of her parents' place, if I remember correctly. And then we went to see the premiere.
Yep. I don't know. It feels sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday, and then sometimes it feels like it's another life ago, honestly.
It was 8 or 9 years ago.
But I don't feel older. That's what's weird about it, is I don't feel significantly older.
You feel like you're in the same mental place you were when you were in college?
In some regard, I feel my personality has always kind of been the same. But career-wise, no.
Well, you've completely changed your career trajectory since then.
Oh, right. So all the things that I'm doing and how I live my life is different. But, people are oh my God, I feel so old. I'm I don't really feel old.
I think that the transformative experience between not feeling old and being old happens when you have children.
Yeah, I think so too, because all my friends have kids, so.
And they look different. They act different. We're all just sort of faded versions of ourselves.
You look the same though.
They call it a transformative experience, which I'm sure you've gone throughout your life during the different epochs of your life, The person you are after you have kids has very little relationship to the person that you were before you had kids. If I were to meet that person right now, I think I would recognize that person, but that person would think I was crazy.
Really?
Why are you living this way? How are you not even...
So I haven't met this Aaron, is what you're saying.
I think Mindshell was really pregnant with our first kid last time we hung out.
Okay.
And so we were kind of starting that process of sacrificing and being okay, our social lives don't matter anymore. Our friend groups, obviously we care about community and kind of having as much of a village as possible, but going out to cool things and doing the cool stuff, it's a zero priority.
Yeah.
And if it happens, then it happens, but it's no longer part of our vernacular. That's just one part of the sacrifice. The other part is your entire life is just now dedicated to these little beings that are kind of sociopathic because they're toddlers.
Yeah.
And you have to train them out of being sociopaths. And it's really rough because they're so manipulative from such a young age, and they're so good at knowing that you love them and you'll do anything for them. And then it's crazy.
Yeah. And then your parents are well, it's a taste of your own medicine, honey.
Do you want to have kids?
Yeah. I feel I've been ready to have kids for 6 years.
Wow. Yeah, you'd be an awesome mom.
Thanks. I'm ready, but I'm also not willing to sacrifice what I don't want.
What are you looking for in a partner?
I think I'm looking for a lot of loyalty and a lot of someone that's ambitious and lighthearted, and I don't know, I think that shares my same values when it comes to family, and that's so important to me. And I feel I had such a great upbringing with my parents, and I'm so close with my parents that if I can offer my kids even half of that, it would be, I think, a dream for them.
What elements of your childhood do you think were the most profound for you that you want to make sure you have for the next generation? What themes or kind of cultural experiences were you yes, I need that in my kids' lives?
I feel my parents were always really fun, and they made monotonous things fun, and they made it a game, and everything was a fun competition. I remember we would go to the grocery store, and when we would come back and unload the groceries, we would play this game where my sister and I would stand on the counter and get to throw the cans and the food to my parents, and they'd have to catch them. And it just was fun. Everything was fun, and I think it taught us a lot of persistence and that willingness to want to win and compete, because we were so competitive as a family all the time So that was great. And then my parents always told me that I could do anything I set my mind to.
The mundane sort of life is everyday life. That's all we do for 99.9% of our existence. And I think that a lot of people forget that when they're thinking about who they want to spend the rest of their lives with, because they think that everything's just this exciting adventure, and it's not. And the person that you can be with through the mundane periods and also the adventurous periods, but definitely the mundane periods, that's the keeper. That's the person you'd want your kids to be with.
Totally.
Right.
Education's so important. I heard this the other day too, where it's like you should want to be, it's called the standing in line theory or something. If you were stuck standing in line, like who do you want to be standing in line with?
Who would you want to be standing in line with?
I don't know. I mean, Oprah would be phenomenal.
Like, that feeling you get when you're at a restaurant and you're really hungry and you see the waitress or waiter coming with the food?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, that's the feeling you should constantly have or at least most of the time have.
Yeah.
With obvious exceptions, because conflicts happen and they're healthy. With the person you end up with and the person you end up marrying is just like this feeling of, oh, thank God, this person's here.
Totally. Just like a warm hug or like hot chocolate on a cold day. Who was I talking to the other day about this? I don't know. We were like kind of being silly and just going and like, this is what it should feel like.
The warm hug's a good analogy. I think actually just warmth. You can't really teach warmth. People often have it or they don't, or they need to tap into it more because they have some unhealthy patterns or some traumas that they haven't yet gotten over. And when you're with someone who can be warm for the majority of the time, that's all you really want. And if you think of your best friends in life, they're not the ones who are necessarily the most high profile or the most elite. They're the ones you always know you're going to be comfortable around.
Yep.
That you can be yourself around. You can just actually have a relationship with them and not worry about how you're coming off.
Yeah. And I feel like my parents, too, have always set a good example of, like, they've always just been best friends. And, like, that doesn't mean, like, they'd never fought or whatever. But, like, they just genuinely enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, it's so annoying sometimes. I'm like, can we just, and they have so much fun with each other.
Your mom's like, I'm so much faster than you. And your dad's like, no.
Yeah.
So if you guys were that competitive growing up, like, was your sister a gymnast?
Yeah.
Was she at the same level?
Yeah, she got a scholarship to a D1 school.
Wow. I didn't know that, but she didn't perform at an Olympic level like you did.
No.
Was that like just for your family? How did you guys handle those conversations?
I mean, she just didn't want to. People would ask her like, "Do you want to go that route?" And I think her famous line, if I remember correctly, was like, "I see what Sam has to go through every day, and like, why would I want that?" And from the outside, part of being a gymnast is like presenting your best self and like having a perma smile and like everything's fine and all of that. And then, I would have to like crawl to the bathroom because I couldn't walk because my ankles were so hurt. And I wouldn't be able to finish homework because I didn't have enough time. And so then my mom would yell at me to go to bed and then I'd yell back. It just like wasn't, I think, what people assume. I mean, maybe people just assume being a high-level athlete, but I think being a high-level athlete when you're a kid is just a really hard thing to go through, and she had a front row seat to all of that.
I think it's a hard thing to go through for any high-level athlete at any points of their careers. It must be more difficult as a kid because you're growing up. You're a child. I was looking at your interviews right before you walked in, and it was like this Access Hollywood interview you were doing, where they were asking you about like the guys you liked. And it was like,
what did I say? What was my 16-year-old answer?
Without missing a beat, she just went for Brad Pitt, which is a fine answer. It was just kind of like, whoa, why are they asking a 16-year-old girl, and in the Access Hollywood, like what other guys, kind of, I was just like, what are they doing? And it was a dude who was interviewing you.
Yeah.
On the camera, and it felt very awkward. But you handled it really well, and you talked about your favorite movies. I think that Knocked Up was one of your favorite movies.
Oh my gosh.
You were talking about Vince Vaughn. I'm not sure if you had media training. Maybe you did. Maybe all the girls did. But maybe your sister saw that and thought, that's not for me.
She's always been more, like, I've been the ham of the family, and she's always, like, does not like the attention on her. Like, she always joked that she couldn't live in LA because she would be, like, stalking the celebs. And, like, she's the one that, like, tells me, like, oh, my gosh, did you hear this? And I'm like, no, I don't care about that. I don't really care. I don't know celebrities. I basically, like, live under a rock.
She'd be self-aware.
She would just be so in it and, like, want the tea. I'm like, no, LA's not like that when you live there.
It sort of is. It can be.
It can't, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't in those circles to, like.
Well, that's, I think, part of why you're able to navigate it in a healthier way. I did feel sort of bad for your younger self, not because, I mean, I'm assuming things. Did you enjoy every step of the media, or were there some moments where you were like, what am I doing? What is this interview?
I've always liked the media. I mean, it was always, my mom worked at USA Gymnastics for 30 plus years, and she was director of communication. So she used to be the one interviewing all the Olympians when I was a little kid. So when I started getting my first interviews, she would do media training with me in the car. So we would do fake interviews all the time, and she would help me answer questions, and she'd be like, okay, this is going to be a really hard one. How are you going to answer it? So she would ask me a really tough question and help me reframe it in a way that I felt comfortable with.
Dude, you were wildly effective as a teenager, actually, on camera. I was very taken by that, and this explains a lot.
Yeah.
So you were literally practicing this
Since
thing.
I've been 12. And so
God.
I've always loved not getting interviews, but I've never been like nervous to do an interview or anything like that, because I feel like I know how to handle it. And if, like, you know, for example, you ask me something I'm not comfortable with, I'll either answer it with something I'm comfortable with, or it'll just be like, I'm not going to talk about that, you know?
The side of you that was projected from a very young age on camera, do you feel a connection to that version and projection of yourself, or is that a projection? Were you taught, or did you learn how to like create a version of yourself for product, basically?
I think that's like a tough one to answer, because it depends on what interview you're talking about specifically versus
when you were like 15, 16, getting ready to maybe go to the Olympics, while you were at the Olympics, like all those moments that you had so many eyeballs on you and you knew it.
I think I didn't know it, actually. I knew people were watching me and I knew people were on TV, but like when you're doing your routines, you're not like, oh, wow, there's hundreds of thousands of people watching me. You know, that's the cool thing about the sport of gymnastics, where you have to focus on what you're doing in that moment. You know, when I look back at that time, it was really before social media. So media has evolved so much along the way, where now it's kind of cool to tell how practice went, and like the girls now talk about their injuries and they do all this other stuff, whereas like back in the day we were not allowed to disclose any of that, because, you know, it would ruin our chances to make a team. And so I think just how we view media has changed. So it's tough to answer, because maybe some of the interviews are, you know, a heightened version. Like I wasn't as honest, I think, as some of the gymnasts are today in interviews, which is sad, really. But that was the culture of media back then versus like, you know, now everyone wants to get as many followers as they want. They want to be as wild as they want.
As vulnerable.
Yeah,
with fake vulnerabilities.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And really make them seem like a character for the, not always for the deals, but like, you know, I think that's a driving force.
Well, so you had this media training, so you were comfortable with it, but you obviously also simultaneously developed an actual passion for the sport. Were those two things always intertwined? It's a sport where you're performing, you're dancing, you're in an outfit, like you're doing all these moves, and it's obviously performative, but it's also an athletic endeavor, like to the extreme. What part of you enjoyed, and how did you start to enjoy the athletic part? How did that come about?
You know, it's so funny. This maybe is my first like memory in life. My mom was working the 96 Olympics, and so my dad was taking care of me. And maybe if he was sitting here, he might tell the story slightly differently, but my mom likes to joke that he was working in the garage and set up a camera so that I was just watching TV and the camera was watching me, basically. And so I was watching, you know, the Olympics for like the 100th time on, you know, VHS or whatever we recorded it on. And I was trying to do all their floor routines. So the video is like me doing these Olympic routines. And I remember having these thoughts of like, wow, I'm so good at this. I'm like so good. And, you know, on TV, they're smiling. They make it look really easy. They make it look fun. So like that was the day I told everyone I'm going to go to the Olympics one day. So we would be at the grocery store, the mall, and I would be like, I'm going to be famous one day. I'm going to go to the Olympics. And my parents would be like, Samantha.
But in the case of your family, though, your family was connected to gymnastics.
Right. Yeah. And like those were my superheroes. Like I would go to school and be like, these are whoever the national team members at that time were, I was like, those were the coolest people in the world.
By the way, there's something really cool about a little kid being so confident in that. Because, I mean, as an adult, that's the adult I know, too, is someone who's just like, I'm going to do this thing. And you have this vision about what you want to do, and you execute things really well. My first cousin was just drafted to the major leagues. He was drafted 23rd overall. He's 18.
Yeah.
And when he was a little kid, I would visit his home, and his father, my uncle, would be kind of tossing him balls and having him do batting practice when he was 3. And my uncle would say things like, he's going to be in the major leagues one day. And we all thought that was insane. Turns out it wasn't insane. And it turns out that this is an achievable thing when you actually grind and go through the process of getting into that situation.
Yeah.
You had probably a good combination of your own willpower and desire to do this thing, plus your parents' know-how, right?
Yeah. Well, I also think like it was how my parents responded to that. Like instead of them being like, I don't know, very few people make it. Like, you know, when you're 5, you believe everything your parents say. And when I said that, my parents were like, okay, yeah, you can do anything you set your mind to. If you want to go to the Olympics, like go to the Olympics. So they weren't like, oh, it's going to be really hard. Like, I don't know if you can do it. There's a lot of things you don't know. Like they just instilled me with that, like, sure, if that's what you want to do, we'll support you. And then, you know, fast forward to me really realizing how tough it was. So when I made that goal, I had no idea, you know, the route of the difficulties it would be. But I think I had such a strong foundation of belief in myself and drive for that one goal that it didn't matter how hard it was going to be.
Would you do it again?
You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and yeah, I think the answer is of course. But I am really happy I didn't know how hard it would have been. I mean, things are shifting and changing, and for my journey and how it went, it was really hard.
I think that's the case for most people that do things that are worthwhile. You know, we started a company when we moved here. It's going well, but had we known everything that we were going to go through before we started, we probably would have started a different company.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, having kids is very challenging, but in life, there's these levers that we like to pull. One is the hedonistic one, which if you're lucky, you get to pull a lot when you're younger. There's the philanthropic one where you help other people and you get a lot of pleasure out of that. It's almost like a bat. Like, good for me. I'm like a virtuous person because I'm doing this philanthropic stuff or helping people. And it's great that people have that one. That's a positive one. Then there's the third lever, which is just like the excruciating challenge lever, which is like becoming a gymnast and grinding from a very young age and sacrificing great periods of your life and transforming yourself to achieve this goal. And each step of the way might be so painful. And then you look back at it and you're like, so those are some of the best memories of my life, right? Like I wouldn't want to give up those memories, but yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, it was a hard time in my life. I mean, the people that I met, and the memories, and even just to say that I've had the experience of doing that, I think is really cool for me. I would say the highs were really high and the lows were really low. But I'm so thankful for the journey because I think it forced me to grow up pretty quickly. And then, you know, now in business, I feel like I'm able to reflect back on all of those hard times where, you know, I think about things in business now where I'm like, okay, this is hard. And then I think about my hardest moment in gymnastics. I'm like, actually, this is really easy. I can handle this.
Well, yeah, that's kind of my view with my own kids now is that if one of them said to me, hey, I want to go be an Olympian, I wouldn't discourage them, even though part of me would think, I don't think you have the genes for you have my genes. My genes are not Olympian level, like athletic genes. But like, I wouldn't discourage them and I would want them to become experts in whatever it was that they were going to try to do, because then they could, to your point, use that ethos of becoming an expert and apply that to other things in life. I guess put another way, would you want your future children to go through what you went through? Do you think that was a good enough experience for your kids to now become gymnasts in the same way that you were?
I want my kids to want to pursue their dreams. If it happens to be gymnastics, cool. I mean, the top 1% of any sport or activity is intense, right? So it doesn't matter if they want to be an Olympic gymnast or Olympic figure skater or a pro tennis player. I think the top 1%, you know, you have to have a little bit of that crazy in you to have the drive. So if they did, great, but I would definitely not be pushing them to want to do that. I think a lot of people thought my parents pushed me because my mom worked at USA Gymnastics, and actually it was the opposite. Like I would get on her that I wasn't training more and that she wouldn't let me homeschool and that they wouldn't let me do more private sessions and I couldn't go 7 days a week. And so we would have like screaming matches. And I'm sure my mom was like, Sam is crazy. Like I was the crazy one.
Yeah, where did that ambition come from? What was that insanity? And it's a positive insanity.
Yeah.
But what is it? How would you even articulate what that is? How would you describe it?
I just didn't know. I think when you're 5, you don't know how hard things are. You say you want to be a doctor or an astronaut or whatever, you know, whatever little kids want to do. And I like to the point where like I am so loyal to, I think, people in my life and things in my life. And I think the same is true to the goals that I have in my life, that I think at such a young age, me saying that was almost like a promise to myself that I didn't even really realize. And that every time I just repeated it when I was a kid, reinforced the fact that like it was going to happen regardless of what stood in my way. And I didn't go to like a gym that produced Olympians. My parents were not Olympians. I didn't know anybody that was an Olympian. So it's not like I had this, red carpet. One of my teammates, Nastia, both of her parents were Olympians. Her dad's Olympic gold medalist. She knew the route and she knew how hard it would be. Like I didn't.
What you just said is really interesting because you basically said I had integrity. I just didn't realize I had integrity.
Yeah.
Because you made a promise to yourself and to the people around you and you didn't want to break that promise, even though, no one would have thought you were breaking a promise. But somehow your little 5-year-old mind was like, no, I made this promise.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out. And to your point, you didn't train at one of the top gyms. Were you good right away? Were you actually good? Or was it something that you had to get better at? What happened there?
Yeah, well, I'm laughing because no, I was not good at all and I had a lot of fears. So the very first level 4, all my teammates and friends got to move up a level. And it's not like every day I went in the gym being like, I'm going to go to the Olympics.
So you went to the non-Olympic gym and then the other kids were all better than you?
Yeah. And so I would say like, oh, I'm going to go to the Olympics. My parents were like, oh, I'm sure behind closed doors they were like, she's not good. But all my friends got to move up levels and I was the only one that had to repeat the level. And it was like detrimental, not because I was worried I wasn't going to make the Olympics. Like I said that. I didn't really have the belief that I was going or not going to the Olympics. I went to gymnastics because my friends were there and I loved them. And I knew that like to go to the Olympics, you had to do the sport that you wanted to go to the Olympics in. So I had to work twice as hard to even just like catch up to their level at such a young age.
So when was the moment where you actually became good in hindsight?
I was 10 and I got selected for the TOPS program, which stood for Talent Opportunity Program. And I was always like really strong. I could do all the conditioning. And so it was basically I got chosen for this conditioning national team or something. And I went to the National Team Training Center for the very first time. And I remember just looking on the walls and seeing gymnastics greatness who were like my idols being like, wow, if they trained here and they went to the Olympics, and now I'm training here, I can go to the Olympics. I think back on moments like that, and I wish that I had that little kid brain sometimes because, in business, you think about things and you're like, oh, God, that's going to be so hard. But, like, if you just take that away, if someone that you meet has done what you want to do, why couldn't you do what you want to do?
The people that I know that are the most successful entrepreneurs are still imbued with childlike wonder. And they don't let those cynical thoughts dominate. They let them seep in because you have to understand the reality of the world to operate within it, but they don't let it dictate their decisions. They don't let them throw off their vision, right? And they still look at the world with this kind of, like to your point, childlike wonder, which if they lose, what's the point of anything? You have to be excited about what you're doing. So that's really sweet, actually. So you're 10 and you're suddenly like, wow, I'm actually good at this.
Yeah.
Was there like a routine? Was there like a trick you did? I don't know gymnastics, obviously, because, I don't think like a lot of dudes watch gymnastics. I could be wrong. Maybe there's like a huge market.
I think now a lot of guys are watching gymnastics.
Also, that's like, I don't know if that's weird. If you're like a guy watching gymnastics, it's like 16-year-old girls. It's like not really a sport you should be tuning into.
Well, you can appreciate the beauty of the sport.
Yeah, is that like a red flag if you're dating a guy and he's like, dude, I love watching gymnastics.
That's never happened to me, but I don't know. Maybe, yeah, I've literally never had that happen to me.
Because I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but it doesn't seem like a normal thing. But anyways, I don't know a lot about it. So was there a moment where you did a thing, and what was that thing? And then how did you feel? Who did you communicate that to? And is that when you started to want to become homeschooled?
I was 12 years old and competing at this meet called the Classics. And I thought that this was like the nationals, like the very last meet of my career. Like no one told me that if I did well, I qualified to championships. And I guess maybe they didn't think I was going to qualify. I had no idea that if I did well at this meet, I would get to compete at another meet. And I just loved competing. So I finished the competition. They were like, you did it. I'm like, did what? They're like, you qualified to championships. I'm like, oh, wow. This was like the big meet I used to watch on TV when I was a kid, and I was 12 years old. I'm like, whoa, I thought that this was the nationals. I get to go to another nationals. So I'm competing at championships. And again, I had no idea I was trying to like qualify for anything. And I finished the meet and I got 7th. And they, I think, took top 10 or top 12 for the national team. So I had no idea I was even trying to make the national team. But I got this cool jacket and I got a plaque, and I just remember being like, you're on the national team. And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what is that? I have no idea.
The feeling of being part of the national team and representing the country. Did you have a concept of America? Were you already proud of America? Was there what was your idea of all that?
I didn't know people in the national team competed for internationally. And so, they had to kind of spell it out of like, okay, you go to Texas once a month. And I'm like, okay, great. And I just love gymnastics. So I was like, great, another opportunity to like do gymnastics. I love that. I love traveling. I love doing gymnastics. Then I got to compete for, USA. And that's kind of when I started seeing how the other gymnasts at that level trained. And I was like, wow, I am not homeschooled and I'm not, as serious as them. Like I got to start paying attention to my diet. I got to, so at 12 is when I think I've always been very self-aware and I can read the room pretty well. And, 12 looking around and being like, my lifestyle is different than these other 12-year-olds and they're much better than me. So like, I need to do exactly what they're doing. I'm laughing because in hindsight, I think that wouldn't have worked for me. I needed to do my own thing to reach my potential. But that's what I thought at the age of 12.
I mean, that's organic. It's very natural that you think that way. So you mentioned eating and dieting. Outside of gymnastics, it's already extremely difficult for especially high school girls and middle school girls to have normal sort of ideas about their image and their body and, eating. Was that something that because you always seemed, at least in pictures and photos and videos, you seemed like a healthy person and you never seemed to go down a route that was darker. Was that something that you were conscious of and you talked about with your family, or like how did you navigate the health of that?
I don't know if like I just being from Indiana or my parents were just always normal, or like, I mean, I think my coach also did a good job of, he was Chinese. Every time I would have a good practice, he'd be like, what'd you eat for lunch? Okay, you need to eat that every single day forever, and we would have like Frosty or ice cream days at the gym, or they did a good job of letting us be a kid or letting the gym be a kid. And I got to like play a kid too for some time. So I feel like the people that were in my immediate circle on a daily basis were just so normal and like tried really hard to let me be a kid.
Thank God.
God.
I feel yeah, it could have gone many, many dark directions. I feel like the Chinese coach thing is so funny. I thought you were about to whip out a Chinese accent for everyone.
It's not good.
Or that he would bring you guys like Chinese food after practice.
Oh gosh, no, definitely would not do that.
So when did you start to actually sense, okay, I'm representing America, and a lot of people see us as these representatives of America? When did that sort of seep in? And did you form a connection with the idea of America? What did it mean to you at that age?
I think that the national staff and everyone traveling with us, it was not a conversation because I think since we were so young, they didn't want to make the competition bigger than what it should have been. I mean, I remember being in competitions and like it is expected that we won, and so it was not ever a question that we would go into a meet and think about losing. It was just like, okay, well, once we win and we do this, and like that's not to say we were taking it lightly, but it was like this expectation that of course we were gonna win. And then we would go to the delegation party and we would give out the USA pins and stuff, and that was always really cool because we could sense that other countries looked up to the way we did gymnastics. So I think besides like a country thing, it was more of specific to gymnastics because USA had been so dominant for so many quads.
So it wasn't necessarily patriotic. It was USA Gymnastics that you felt this initial attachment to.
Yeah, there was Pan Am Games, and that was the first time I had been in a meet with other sports. It's kind of like a mini, Olympic Games. And so that, with the Olympics, you see other sports and other USA athletes. And I think that's really, at the Olympic Games, talking to other athletes and their stories and how they got there and just their hardships, where they live. That's really when I started to develop this. I don't want to say I wasn't a fan of being American, but like I took a lot of pride of being from this country that valued hard work. Not that certain countries don't do that as well, but I think traveling internationally and seeing the USA athletes, you could tell that they had so much heart and like willpower to win that exceeded every other, maybe genetic way that they trained or training in general. And you can like beat bodies down and you can train 5 times a day. You can eat all the right things. But if you don't have the like willpower and that drive and passion to do something that you love, I don't think that you're going to be dominant in anything. When you're training and there is nothing else that matters other than your training. It's like you don't think about all the people watching you. You don't think about what your friends are doing at home. Like you have such a narrow mind. And I think you have to at something like the Olympic Games. Like you are not thinking about everything. And I feel like I've thought more about what it means now. And every year I get away from the Olympics or that time in my life, I think about how cool it is and how much pride I feel from those moments and getting to live that. But at the time, I mean, there's not room for you to entertain that.
You could be a life coach for a bunch of CEOs. Because that philosophy should be applied to anyone who's building a business, right? And anyone's doing any sort of endeavor, whether it's artistic or athletic or anything else. And that lesson's often lost on people because they're constantly worried about the way they're perceived, whether or not they're experiencing everything they should be experiencing. And it takes away from their ability to actually perform at the highest level.
Yeah.
When you got back from China, and you went back to school because you weren't homeschooled and everyone had watched you on TV, did you feel like people were treating you differently? Or did you think, oh, I'm slipping right back into my school life and everyone's treating me just the same?
You know, I mean, the Olympics it's a weird feeling for me because I was slated to compete in a lot of events, and 5 minutes before the competition, I hurt my ankle. I actually sprained every single ligament in my ankle. And I mean, I heard it pop, and I remember one of my teammates came across the floor and was like, hey, I heard your ankle pop. Are you okay? And I was like, no, dude, I'm not okay. And so my coach came over and they were like, all right, you got to walk from here to the door without like limping or showing any emotion. And I was like, okay, but I like couldn't walk on my foot. And so I got to the door and they gave me a cortisone shot as quickly as possible. But, you know, it takes 20 minutes for it to kick in. So they gave me the shot and they're like, all right, try to tumble. And my leg like gave out and I kind of landed on my head. And they were like, okay, you are out. You can't compete. And so I was supposed to be first on floor. I was supposed to be competing at the Olympics in 5 minutes and they pulled me. So they basically were like, all right, well, you have to go in there. We're redoing all the lineups and the order of everything, and you cannot look upset. You can't take any, distraction away from what they're doing. You need to be this, that, and the other. And I was just so shocked because it happened so fast. And I still competed bars with my ankle like taped, and I had to land on it and, ended up again, tearing every ligament possible in my ankle. It was huge for weeks. So individually, I did not have the Olympic Games that I was hoping to have, that I wanted to have. I am like so proud to be a silver medalist and that our team did such a great job. And I think it was such a good life lesson that my role moved from being this athlete competitor to more of like a cheerleader role. But I just remember after the meet, after we won a silver medal, the media was like, do you feel like you should give the medal back since you didn't compete at your best to deserve it? And, being 16, that moment, I was like, whoa, like, did I not earn this? Like, was I not part of the team? Like, they're right. I didn't compete what I was supposed to. And it really got in my head. I still remember it as clear as day now of like how much that impacted me. And the national team pulled me aside and they were like, listen, we know this is like upsetting, but you can't talk about this with the other girls because we want them to be in like the best possible place to compete. And we don't want them to like feel sad for you. And so I just would take really long showers and like cry by myself in the shower. And I couldn't talk to my parents because they were in China and our phones didn't call them. And it was just a really isolating and lonely feeling not to have anybody there to talk to. So when I came back from the Olympics, it was the opposite response. I got to go on the Oprah show and I got to meet the president and my school threw me a pep rally, but it almost felt like fake because in my head I was like, wow, all these people probably think that I didn't deserve it too. And so
it was just always in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And so I didn't allow myself to really like enjoy those moments as much as I wish that I would have because I felt like an imposter in a way of like, oh, I just kind of snuck in there and like got this medal. And so I think that actually ended up being a good thing because, I would never meet someone and be like, hey, guess what I did? And, I'm past it enough where it is such a cool, fun fact, and I'm not in that headspace. Like, it was hard, and I was definitely part of the team, and I did so much, and, it was a team effort.
I'd be so worried for you if you were the kind of person that met people and were like, yeah, I was an Olympian gymnast.
Yeah.
It would be crazy. Although it is an incredibly impressive, obviously interesting thing that I do enjoy talking about with you.
Yeah.
It'd be insane if that was what you were doing.
Right.
And very, very unhealthy. But I will say it's extremely difficult for me to understand how all of you really, really peak in this sport at such a young age. And then you have the rest of your life to have the story that you constantly have to repeat. That's kind of like part of like your projection of who you are, because people are always interested in it, want to hear more about it. And at that age, maybe you weren't thinking too much about that. I hope you weren't. But in hindsight, that's probably also what you were going through at the same time that you were going through this insane insecurity that maybe you didn't deserve a medal. You were also going through, I'll never be as good as I was right before I got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I learned after, it's called post-Olympic depression. And, I came back and I had to get surgery on my knee that I tore my meniscus like a week before I left the Olympics. So that's a different story. But so I had to get knee surgery. My ankle had to heal. And here I was like back in school, living this like normal life where all my friends were on tour, doing whatever they wanted and having so much fun. And like was like going to get a detention if I didn't wear shoes that had backs on them because I went to a private school with a dress code. So I was like really living this double life and this identity crisis of, am I this Olympic gymnast? Am I this like normal high school kid that just wants to go to like prom? I didn't really know. And so I would just go home and like, to your point, I never thought a day past the Olympics ever. And I don't know what I thought was going to happen, just a free pass in life. But I think it was really hard to be so committed to this one goal literally since I was 5. It's like you're playing a video game and you beat the game. You're just like, I didn't even know how to set another goal.
I made it to heaven.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No.
Do you know what the premise is?
No. I don't know anything about movies.
It was a TV series and also a movie. It was basically the reason why it was such a brilliant premise was because it was about a high school girl that became the chosen one to kill all the vampires. But she just wanted to be a normal high school girl. But she was special. And that's the entire premise of the series. And so she has to kill vampires while she's like trying to just fit in and go to prom and like do the normal high school things. Maybe that's kind of really on point actually in parallel to sort of an experience that you were going through after the Olympics. Because you were special, you knew you were special, you beat the video game. And now you're back in school and you're like, I can't even wear shoes without backs on them. And I'm going to get in trouble and I have to get detention. It's just such a wild experience.
Yeah, it was really weird. I had 2 more years left of high school and didn't know where I was going to go to college. And I was just like mad at the world. I think it was what it felt like. I had a boyfriend at the time and he went off to college and I just was not happy I wasn't able to do gymnastics and that's what I loved. So there was just a lot that kind of, I think when it rains, it pours. It's kind of been a theme in my life, I think for good and for sometimes bad in those regards. But I think everyone goes through those moments in life, but mine just happened to be at a much younger age than most people.
Younger, but also a lot higher profile. The way that most people go through it is they get into the college of their dreams, especially in our generation, because I hope it's changing now. But in our generation, everyone was obsessed with whatever college they were going to get into. Then they get in and it's like, okay, I'm here. Now what? And so maybe in order to alleviate that a little bit, you then made college the next sort of bar that you wanted to get to.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like when I first started college, I was like, college is stupid. Not college academically, but in terms of like sport. I mean, I didn't leave college finishing this way or having this mindset, but like I was going to college to get the best education I could to set me up for life after gymnastics. I didn't realize I would enjoy college gymnastics as much as I ended up loving it. But yeah, I mean, that was something that I was really looking forward to. I always felt like an adult in a little kid's body. And so the fact that I could just like finally be on my own and like my parents didn't have to give me rules and like I could just live life the way I wanted to, like I was so excited for that next chapter.
How did you healthily handle it? How did you deal with this I beat the video game moment? And how did you get out of it?
I think I didn't handle it well. I mean, I think that was a time where people weren't talking about mental health and they weren't talking about like all of these things. And, I reference like just how amazing my parents were and are. But, I've always been somebody that's like woken up on the right side of the bed. And like, even on my hardest days, like my mom would be like, don't go to practice today. I'm like, no, I have to. I've always like had a positive mindset. And this was the first time where I would come home and just like, I think there was nothing inside of me. I would just stare at a blank wall and I was just not okay. And, I didn't know, no one understood what I was going through. So I would talk to, my other Olympic teammates and, I would go and do a few tour stops and start to, introduce some like fun into my life. Like I didn't know how to have fun. I dedicated all of that year to like morning to night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, eating perfectly, thinking the right thoughts, like everything to get myself to make it to this Olympic team.
You did everything that a professional NBA player probably goes through psychologically. Like when an NBA player retires, it's apparently a very difficult part of their lives, but they're adults, they have families, they have kids. Mm-hmm. You're 16.
Yeah.
And you're figuring out life still. It's unreal.
Yeah.
So you grew. It's pretty special that you made it out and are as adjusted as you are. Maybe I don't know other gymnasts. Maybe all gymnasts are like you, but I know a lot of child actors and they didn't make it out very well, if that makes sense, because they have similar experiences where they've reached mountaintops of attention, but maybe not actually in terms of their discipline and work ethic that they put into their craft like you did, because you had to become the best in the world at what you did. When you're a child actor or musician, you just kind of are entertaining for a second. You get like a lucky break. So it's different. That's special and also sad. I'm sorry that you went through that.
No, I mean, I don't think of it as sad. I think that like everyone experiences hard moments in life, and I am so thankful that I went through that, because every hard moment since then has become a little easier because you know how to deal with it, like feeling that. And then I would go to certain places. I remember doing recruiting trips and I would run into my other Olympian friends and they'd be like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, it's been really hard. And they're like, oh, post-Olympic depression. I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know there was a name for it. And so the fact that I, realized, wow, it wasn't just me. It was like, you're on the highest of highs and you come back and it's just all over. It's something that anyone experiences. And maybe you guys feel like this in business too. You're crushing it, you're grinding for this one launch or this one project. And then like when it's over, you kind of have that like letdown feeling. And it's, of course, the bigger the project, the more heightened those emotions and feelings are. But since then, it's like, I try to be emotionally as even keel as possible so that, you can stabilize the highest highs and the lowest lows a little bit better.
Have you studied Marcus Aurelius, the Stoics?
I have not.
I'll send you a book after this that Ryan Holiday wrote. He's actually...
Oh, yeah. I love Ryan Holiday.
Local, yeah. So his whole thing is kind of translating Stoicism for people like me and you maybe. But he's great. I'm trying to imagine being in that situation for the things that I cared the most about and then actually getting to the highest levels and sacrificing so much to get there. And then needing to be 16 years old and just, all right, back to school. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my parents knew. I mean, no one knew how to handle it. They were just like, I don't know.
There's such a thing as positive stress versus negative stress, right? There's a lot of Vietnam War veterans that go and fight and they come back and they become major business leaders. And then a lot of them come back and they're homeless and they can't get their lives together. And it's really tragic. And the line between what makes someone like an insanely incredible business leader and then the most dysfunctional members of our society, it's really thin. And it's two types of madness. It's very, very scary because you can go through crazy stresses and traumas in your life, whatever they may be, whether they're dead relatives, going to the pinnacle of a career at an early age and having to like figure out what your life's going to be afterwards. And you can go in either direction. And it's a very thin line and tightrope that we all have to walk when we hit those moments. And people don't talk enough about positive stress and positive traumas because they can really put you into a good direction, even if they're excruciatingly difficult and you wouldn't wish them onto anyone. So maybe there's something really profoundly positive about going through that experience at the age of 16 that made you a much more complete adult.
I don't know. I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, actually.
Like I wouldn't wish anyone going to war either. But the people who went through it, for instance, I have had people in my life I lost at a very young age that I was really close to. I wouldn't want my kids to go through what I went through. But I'd be lying if I said that experience didn't make me a more complete person who could empathize and sympathize with people better, actually be able to roll with punches and be there for people when they're down and out, in a way that other people can't because I went through that. There's something there. It's just, of course you don't wish that on others. It's like maybe you can create like fake traumatic experiences for kids to try to.
Oh gosh.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You're like firing guns outside their house.
Yeah. No, I mean, my dad still claims that like the reason I was good at balance beam was because of him. We used to play this like game where it was a balancing game and you would close your eyes and you'd stand on one leg and he would come up and scare you and you'd have to like balance. And so I don't know, everything we just did was like, maybe that's like a positive trauma of like being scared, but also having to be like so stoic that like, you know, when you're on the balance beam and 10 years later, 20 million people were watching me, or I was able to focus because, you know, when I was 10, I played this, you know, moi game with my dad. So I don't know. I think who's to say like which direction our lives would go if you make a different decision. But I think that I've never really believed in regrets. And for me, like, even if it was an undesired outcome, it was necessary for the path that I'm on, regardless of if I know the reasoning yet or not. And to your point, yeah, since I did not have a very perfect gymnastics journey, and I think on paper you can look at my resume and be like, what do you mean? You've achieved everything at the highest level? You've done all these things? And like, sure, yes, of course. I'm so thankful. But it was not a perfect road. And if you read the fine print, it's not always the happy ending that I think people assume. And so I feel like I'm able to give back, and it's such a piece of me that's like almost more grateful to the experiences than if it would have gone perfectly.
So college ends up being a really great experience.
Yeah, I loved college. I mean, I didn't go to like the party school, but
UCLA?
Yeah.
It wasn't USC?
No, it was definitely, I'd like to think it's the smarter one of the two.
I met you when you were leaving UCLA, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it wasn't a party school, but you were in Los Angeles. I'm sure you went to parties. You were a student athlete.
Regular students dislike student athletes. They do not want to be partners with anyone that's an athlete because they don't think that we're smart enough.
What'd you major in?
Communications.
So you leave UCLA. What's in your mind? What's your vision for the rest of your life, year one out of school?
I really didn't know, and I think that was, you know, going through the hard thing after the Olympics. I knew I was going to go to college. My parents were both college athletes. I knew that that was going to happen for me, even though it was a few years out. But when I graduated college, I really didn't know. I had a few options. I wanted to like start my own business. I had no idea what that meant. So I wanted to go to business school. And I also wanted to do sports broadcasting. And I also didn't know how to start that. And so it was, for me, just trying to get as much experience as possible in both of those and kind of see what happens. So like I had a job interview at Deloitte because I was like, maybe I want to be a consultant. I love like kind of being a coach to CEO. Like I would love that. And then I like canceled it the day of because I didn't want to do that. I gave myself like I think I had a half of a year to kind of figure it out. I did a bunch of camps and I had some money saved up. And so I was giving myself like 6 months to see if I could make broadcasting work. And in those 6 months, I got my first job opportunity with the Pac-12 networks. So I'm like, okay, wow, this is going to last me for the next, 4 months. And then I'll have to kind of figure it out. And so that's really what it's been like, is like piecing the things that I'm passionate about together. And how can I, make enough money to survive off of the things that I really love to do.
What do you see yourself doing like in 10 years from now? Do you still see yourself attached to gymnastics, or do you see yourself kind of living a life beyond or separated from gymnastics to a degree?
It's a good question. I mean, I said this the other day. I'm like, if I was a billionaire, I think I would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now, probably on a much smaller scale because I work a lot right now. But yeah, I do somewhat see myself doing what I'm doing now. Like, I love being creative. I'm the idea person. So I love helping my friends with their businesses and, hey, have you thought about this? And just a different way of looking at things. Like, I've never been an inside of the box thinker. I've always been a big thinker. And so now that I've kind of proven that I can do it and I have the confidence in business with myself, I always joke that like next company I start is something that I'm not going to like hopefully be as emotionally attached to so I can actually sell it and make good money. But I have a hard time thinking I would ever sell Beam Queen because of how close to my heart it is.
Yeah, you have a high degree of integrity and you make promises to yourself that I think you've kept since you were 5. So it would be unrealistic to expect yourself not to.
We've had a couple calls and I don't know. I guess there's a price tag on everything. also, because I'm like, wow, that would be really nice. But it's not fully grown yet to even entertain those conversations.
I feel like if there was a super wealthy version of you that still was into broadcasting, there'd be like a more unfiltered version of you.
Yeah.
Because I think that if you're getting into media and you're getting into broadcasting, you have to be really careful about certain things, which I need to care about way less than you do. But even I need to think sometimes about what I'm saying because I'm still associating with people like you who need to be able to associate with people like me. Because and that's just the way the world works.
It is. I mean, and to me, it's not even being filtered, but it's being sensitive of the audience that's watching it, right? They don't know me. They haven't known me for years. Let's say that they're just watching this interview. It's the first time they're ever seeing me. They don't have context to necessarily support maybe beliefs or things that I feel because they haven't known me for that long. So it's more so being sensitive to that than like I'm worried about my own image. I don't really care. I mean, if I say something and they take it the wrong way, it's like, okay, well, you just took it the wrong way and I'm sorry, that's on you. But for me, it's like I want to make sure that everything I say that is people are understanding the context in which I'm saying it.
I guess there's two things I'd want to talk to you about before we wrap this up, which is advice to young women about how they should approach gymnastics in general, regardless of their abilities or aptitudes.
Whether it's gymnastics or not, like, are you passionate about it? You know, like, does it bring you joy? And I think happiness is different than joy. And I've done like a lot of thinking on what that means. And to me, like, joy is something easy and accessible that you can feel and do every single day. Happiness feels like a little bit more heavy for some reason and like harder to achieve. But for me, like, is the activity of gymnastics bringing you joy? You know, is it creating a workout for you and you enjoy that? Like, what part of it do you enjoy? And if so, then it doesn't matter if it's gymnastics or soccer or pickleball or cards or an instrument, you know, like I think activities and hobbies and, you know, it's funny, that's something that I feel like I lack since I retired is I really have not found that many hobbies since I retired from gymnastics, but I've been trying all these things and it's fun to be a student of something new and like not to be the best at something and be a beginner. So I guess my advice is like, what value is it bringing in your life? If it's joy, then great. Go in every day with a great attitude, listen to your coaches, push yourselves, set goals, and you're going to get out of it what you put in, similar to everything in life.
Dude, you're wildly good at this. I have
you know, this is my job.
so much respect for your ability to do this. It is your job. I mean, your job is to do it in a polished way. You write essays on the fly. You're like artificial intelligence for really deep and meaningful, like
I promise
sports
I don't
related.
have like a earpiece like AI in my ear.
Yeah, no, it's actually really impressive. And also, I mean, I can attest to this in real life. You have this ability too, and you are grounded and conversationally incredibly fun to hang out with. Like Mainch and I remark upon how much we missed you over the past few years. But I guess the last thing that I would talk about is actually arts and what you like and what you find inspiring. Not just what you enjoy, but what you, throughout your life, books, movies, it can be articles even, things that just stuck with you that you often call back to in your heart or your head and that really push you forward to do the things you do because you put it really well. You were a crazy kid. You're still a crazy adult in the most beautiful way. What kind of fuels that fire and keeps you in that mindset?
I mean, when I was training 5-6 hours a day, people always ask me like, you know, what did you sacrifice? And at the time, I didn't feel like I was sacrificing anything. I felt like I had the best of both worlds. Like I had to miss a dance here or there and it was like terrible and I was so sad to miss that. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't books. Like I was pressed to even get my reading done for my homework, let alone like fun books. There wasn't podcasts. That wasn't a thing. But music was a really big part of my life. And I remember when I finally could drive and I would just blare it on the way to practice and
what songs?
Probably rap. Like that was like what did it for me. Like
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster. Like
anything that just like made me feel really hard. Like I went to this like Catholic school growing up in a uniform, and I'm like rolling up. Like my dad always bought two CDs, the edited and the unedited, and he loved Nelly growing up. So we just like always grew up with like loud music in the car, AC/DC, all of the songs. And so it's also an important piece of gymnastics, right? Your floor routine's always to music. And so I think throughout my career, music has been consistent. But it's funny because the type of music that I like is dependent on the situation. So training, I would listen to a lot of rap. Now I listen to a lot of country, more like Leon Bridges, that kind of style. I kind of like folk, a lot of like banjo stuff is cool for me. But yeah, I think as I evolve, the music I listen to also changes. I just remember training by myself and just feeling like music, I would turn it up all the way and just kind of like have this outer body experience of like as much conditioning as I could do. And it would kind of remind me what my goals are that I set that day. Because, I mean, as you know, I think it's pretty easy to set goals, but I think it's really, really hard to remind yourself of them consistently and to actually act upon them. And so on the days where you get out of bed and you're like, I just don't want to go to practice, I would have to be like, okay, why am I going to practice? I could not go to practice. Or I could go and get a little bit closer to my goal. And it's like, okay, this one wins every time. So I think like always giving yourself the option. And I've never felt disabled because I've been a woman or a girl or, maybe that's how my parents raised me or my dad raised me. But I've always felt like I had a choice even as a little kid. I never felt forced to do anything. And I think that actually made all of this stronger and more fulfilling for me because it's something that I chose every single day. But when I retired from gymnastics, I listen to a ton of podcasts now. I read a lot of articles.
Which podcast?
I like The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. I like Jay Shetty's. I like Boss Babe. I like podcasts that I can learn something from. So usually it's like, okay, I'm stuck in my business or, I'm needing motivation and I will just find something that will kind of be speaking to me. Much cheaper than having, I do have a business coach, but it's a second business coach, which is nice.
I can't let the retirement thing just fly by because you're clearly not retired, but you guys use that word because you retired from this thing that you went to the highest of the highs with. Like retired. When you use that word, is it natural to you now to say, yeah, I retired from the sport? Like I was a pro and now I'm retired at the age of 20, whatever you were, like 24 or something.
I don't know. I guess it is normal because I'm in a sport where most people are retired at my age.
The old age of 24 or whatever you were when you retired.
Yeah, I think I retired when was I 24, 23? Something like that.
I'm sorry, 23.
23, 24. But yeah, I mean, I feel blessed to have accomplished a lot. And to your point, like I think I used to see it as a burden of like, whoa, I have to do the next big thing, or like, how am I going to make myself proud when I've already achieved what a lot of people would say is like the pinnacle in someone's career. So I feel like I used to put a lot of pressure. And now that I think I've found career success in my careers, I feel like I just want to live a life that I enjoy what I'm doing. And that's what I've done with my businesses, and they've been really successful. So if I can continue just waking up and doing the things that I love, surrounding myself with the people that I love, like I feel like I will live a pretty fulfilled life.
I guess that Olympics was famous. Like in 2008, I was in college and I was in Vegas during the Olympics because I remember watching Kobe. And I think I was with Adam, actually, of all people.
In Vegas, watching the Olympics?
Yeah, because it was like the Redeem team. And they had lost in some championship. Or they lost in the Olympics 4 years before in Greece. And so they had to come back and they crushed it in China. But you guys were probably so disconnected from all that.
I mean, we got to meet them, which was cool. And then we got to meet them at the Oprah show as well, which was cool. So, I mean, we met a lot of the athletes. I mean, Ricky Barons was
Who's he?
on the team.
Oh, Ricky.
Yeah. I was like, Ricky.
I know him in person.
Yeah.
I was like, celebrity Ricky? And I was like, no, this guy like lives around here.
Ryan Lochte, Michael Phelps, like all the biggest names. I mean, we got to meet. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the basketball team was really cool. They're so tall. And yeah, it was just surreal. It's like a dream that was so vivid.
But is there any connection between height and gymnastics? Like if you do gymnastics, can you stunt your growth?
I don't think there's been any studies. I mean, I was definitely going to be short regardless. Who's to say? Like I couldn't have been a couple inches taller.
Are both your parents pretty small?
Yeah.
And your sister's small too?
Yeah, but she's taller than me.
So it's possible that really intense gymnastic training can lose you a couple inches.
Yeah, maybe.
Interesting. I wonder, it doesn't really matter for women, but for men maybe it matters a little bit. I don't know.
They peak at such a later age. So like when we went to the Olympics, the men's gymnasts were like 10 years older than us.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like real camaraderie or friendship there. It was just like...
There was friendship, but it wasn't like you were dating each other because they were like our brothers.
Hopefully not. It would be more like, older brother mentorship sort of situation.
Yeah. We just had a reunion a few weeks ago and like with the men's and the women's team, and everyone went around the room and gave a speech, and it was so amazing just to see where everyone is now. And I think different than most of the teams, ours was really close for some reason. And we all have that like loyalty to our team. And I think none of us would ever air dirty laundry, I think different than other teams. And we just really support each other, even if it's from afar. So I'm always like really appreciative of the girls and the guys on that team. Like I could call them if I needed them and they would drop everything.
That's really special. And I didn't expect that actually. So you guys went around the table and all just made speeches. And you guys are adults now and everyone's sort of in different parts of their lives.
Yeah.
And you guys are all still really close. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, we don't see each other every day. We definitely don't talk every day. But, I think after the Olympics, you're still in that competitive mode and everyone's kind of trying to figure out like who they are as people and then who your friendships are. And now it's like, it's been so long that, we just came back together and it's like, wow, I really want to support what you're doing in life now. Nothing matters other than like, us having that shared experience.
You can easily imagine a team that was just at each other's throats, backstabbing and trying to get everyone else to perform worse so that they could have a better shot at being in the spotlight. So why do you think that your team and the camaraderie you had with the boys team too, why do you think that those teams were so healthy? What were the factors that went into it? Were just the people good, or was it the coaches? Was it like the culture that you guys specifically had versus other years? Like, what do you think that was?
I actually don't know. I mean, it's hard to say when you're not part of other teams to pick apart the differences.
But I'm sure you were in some bad situations at some points in your life, in and out of gymnastics.
Yeah, and it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows. I mean, it was really competitive, and it was we were teenage girls. So like, then you heighten that by trying to make the Olympic team, and it's like, of course we butt heads. And I guess the best way that I could describe it is like sisters. When you're in high school and like your sister's stealing your clothes and you're just like, ugh. But it's one of those where it's like you're the only one that's allowed to make fun of your sister. Like if I ever heard somebody else making fun of, one of them, I would be the first person to be like, excuse me.
I have 2 daughters now.
Yeah.
Any advice for me as a dad? How to be a proper father, because I've never been in this situation before. They're young enough now, so that doesn't matter yet.
Yeah.
But I can even see the 1.5-year-old start to do things where I'm like, oh, she's a girl. She's going to act differently than I understand.
Yeah.
How are dads supposed to be in your mind?
I talked to my parents about it because they were pretty young parents and they were like, we didn't know what we were doing. We just did the best that we could. And I don't know. I think that my parents did a really good job of having their own lives, and I just remember my parents being like, yeah, we brought you on the boat. We did all these things and you just lived life. Like we didn't stop our lives so that you could live yours. We supported you and your practices and your life was definitely a priority over ours. But I think they also made sure to have some fun themselves too.
So you're saying we should go to Burning Man every year?
Oh gosh. I mean, if that is your thing, then yeah, I want that for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I don't know how mine's just going to feel about that.
No, she wants to go too.
Oh, okay, then great.
Do we take the kids with us?
No. Well, I guess I don't know. I'll be Burning Man, but probably not. I don't think my parents were like the Burning Man
Okay, so
couple.
Don't be Burning Man
They were
couple.
like going to like live music at a restaurant, I don't think that they were like doing Burning Man. That would be hilarious. I'll ask them. Did you ever go to? My parents don't know what Burning Man is, probably. So
I get your point, and I think that's really important. Were there any specific memories you have of your dad that really stuck with you as a positive, comforting presence, or was it just a consistent, like you were saying, the person that was always there and appreciating life, and also just being there and supportive of you and your sister?
I think my dad and we didn't realize until, when I got older that our personalities are much more similar. And I'm not an emotional person, but I'm really sentimental with certain moments. And so he would write me like good luck cards that I still have. And like even now, like after a season of Beam Queen, he'll write me a card of just being like, I'm so proud of you. And him like telling me how proud he is when he's not like an emotional guy. He's not like a hugger. He's just like this tough. He was an athlete in college and,
What sport?
hockey and wrestling.
Oh, that's pretty tough.
So my parents were, both athletes. They were tough on us growing up, but like in a loving way. And I think knowing that whether I made the Olympic team or whether I had the worst day of my life, they would always love me. And it wasn't based on my grades in school. And it wasn't based on how well I did in the gym. And there was no strings attached. It was totally unconditional love. And I think that was the difference moving from Indiana to California. I saw a lot more of that in California, which made me a little bit nervous because I'd never experienced something like that versus like in Indiana, everyone's parents just wanted them to like be happy and they were going to love them no matter what.
The life I see you live is the life I'd want my daughters to live. Like it's like a really proper.
Aaron. Even me going to California and like experiencing lots of different cultures and lots of different things in Indiana, like really I grew up with one way of living. And I would come back and I think my parents still think I'm like woo-woo, which compared to like LA and Austin, I am the least woo-woo person ever.
You're less woo-woo than me probably.
Yeah, but I think in their mind, I went to LA and experienced all these things. And even that, they were just supportive. And as long as I was being a good person and happy, that's all they wanted.
I love the letter thing. I think I'm for sure going to adopt that for all my kids. Just write little letters on like a regular basis. Just kind of explaining why I'm so excited for them and like grateful for them. And then I guess the pride thing's interesting because there's a positive pride and there's a negative pride where a parent can take ownership in their kids' experiences to try to live vicariously through them rather than being just like excited for them. And that's the kind of pride that I want to tap into, I think, as much as I can.
In my business now, we run gymnastics camps around the world. And for me, like the life skills component is so important. And what I see a lot of times with parents is that, their kids start struggling and they just jump in and do it. Oh, I'll do it for you. And so instead of letting their kids just struggle, it's like, no, let them struggle and figure it out. You're right. It's going to take 5 more minutes, but just like let them do it. And the next time it's going to take them 3 minutes. Then the next time they're going to do it as quickly as you.
My son's not even 3 yet. And he loves getting the milk out of the fridge, pouring it into the beaker to measure it, putting it into the microwave. And he spills half the time still, and it takes like 10 minutes longer than it should. But to your point, I have to let him do all the things he's trying to do on his own, even if it's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
The life skills thing's interesting. You should teach them Stoic philosophy, like Stoics for kids kind of thing.
We have confidence training, so I think we try to instill it in a kid-friendly way. But, even when they walk in the door, my dad will oftentimes help me with the registration and I try to pay him and he won't ever cash the check, but he just like enjoys being there and is so ready for grandkids. But, he'll come and ask the kid, what's your name? And the mom will jump in and say, oh, this is Sally Sue. And my dad won't let it go and will be like, no, I asked her, what's her name? For him, eye contact and projecting your name is such like a really crucial skill for like a kid. And I adopted that. I've only made one kid cry, but if someone can't confidently tell me their name, there's other problems that we got to fix.
I was at a birthday party for a 1-year-old and I was shaking the hands of the parents saying, nice to meet you. Oh, nice to meet you. And I turned around and my son was 2 at the time or just under 2. And he was shaking everyone's hand going, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And he was just kind of imitating me. I feel like your life skills training can often be directed to the parents too.
Yeah.
And you have to sit them down in their separate seminars because if you're only addressing the kids, you're probably not going to get them as far as you want them to go because the parents also need to be on board with the right kind of philosophy.
Right. But usually the parents are like, they see what he's trying to do and they're like, oh, and the fact that like we're including them and we're, treating them like adults in terms of like respecting them conversationally, I think that they really appreciate that. So we've gotten a lot of like good responses and like, then you have the hams of the kids that are like, hey, my name's Adrian or whatever. And you're like, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. But not like my sister. So I think my parents kind of had both to deal with.
Wait, how'd you come up with the name Bean Quims?
I remember the exact coffee shop I was in New York City, and I was just scribbling and brainstorming. And like, I feel like my genius is like actually just brainstorming. I can come up with like 20 what I think are great ideas, but kind of combining them all together. And I came up with the name Beam Queen and the whole structure. And at first I was like, oh, it's too cliche, like Beam Queen, of course. And now it's so perfect. And ironically, it used to be my AIM screen name back in the day.
Oh, so this comes way back. You're probably amazing at brainstorming, but I think your superpower is executing and grinding through the most difficult parts of any sort of process. It must be that.
That is nice of you to say. I think I do that. I think my favorite part is the brainstorming stage.
Okay, that's a favorite. That's everyone's favorite part. But the actual execution is the part that is the hardest and probably matters the most.
I think my specialty in business and maybe life is that when things get chaotic and stressful, I actually get more calm. So when these events happen and, something, the technology or the Wi-Fi is not working, I think a lot of people go into panic mode and have a lot of anxiety, and I get really calm. So like the more stressed I am, the more calm I get. On the inside, I don't feel that way, but everyone always tells me like, yeah, all these things went wrong, and like you are just so calm, which is funny because I don't feel that way, but like that is how my outside demeanor is I'm like, it's totally fine. We're going to handle it.
That is a superpower. Do you know who Ulysses S. Grant was, the general president? So he was a total loser between the Mexican-American War and the Civil War, and he was an alcoholic, and he was losing his kind of story. And it wasn't until the crazy crisis of the Civil War that he was brought back to being this epically effective general, because he needed crisis. You don't need crisis, but you also are someone who probably just excels when there's a crisis, and you're able to then like kind of find that peaceful place in the middle of the hurricane.
Yeah. I mean, I think more clear, if that's even, the more pressure and the more like stress there is, I think I have more clarity.
Dude, you could be like a military strategist.
You know what? In my next life, I will add that to the laundry list of like careers I'd like to have.
It's not too late. Just don't make the promise, because then you'll end up having to do it.
I know. So. Now I'm like, I have to be really mindful on what like
commit to
goals and what I commit to, because I just know that that's something about my personality is like I have a hard time like letting go of a vision, or, because I'm so committed, I guess.
I mean, you shouldn't drop the part that commits, but you should definitely be worried about committing too much.
Yeah. Now I need to commit less. Now I need to actively start saying, no to things, or, recognizing when I have a stressful schedule, or, things like that.
Totally. And people respect that, I find, that when you start to define those kinds of things and you start to say, hey, like, I can't do this, people are pretty cool about it.